Let's go in to get Syracuse.
Okay.
Because if you all want some really good answers to
2,
those questions.
3, 4, 5. All right. Welcome to the Codes Fair and Farmers Market Committee meeting. We have 3 bills. The first one is 2021-795 by Porterfield. I think we've agreed to put that on the heel and give her a chance to get here since we deferred it by rule last time. And the second bill up is BL 2021-829 by.
Kick that to the heel as well.
Okay. And then the third bill is 2021-833 by Sledge, Toombs, and Cash. It approves the Fourth Amendment to an agreement between the Metro government and Adkisson and Associates Architects Incorporated. I do have a letter from Council Member Sledge.
Seconded.
All right. I do know that. Thank you. I do know that this is a time extension on a project that the Fairgrounds is working on. I think it relates to the. Well, do you want to speak to it?
I sure can. So this is our architect who was originally procured through RFP 5 years ago. And we've had a little bit of delay in getting the final piece done, which is our maintenance building. COVID, supplies, wanted to do some coordination between that building and our infrastructure project. It made sense to kind of combine the review of those 2 items. So we anticipate that his services will go beyond November, which is when his contract officially expires. So we just decided better safe than sorry and have a time extension to project completion instead of a date firm on the contract.
Okay, so it's so it gives y'all more time to get that complete. It does not cost any more money. And are there any questions or comments from committee members? All in favor?
Aye.
Sure. Any opposed? All right, so that's 7-0. All right, still no Councilmember Porterfield.
Did we look for in the
Yeah,
chamber?
we need either Porterfield or Syracuse.
Syracuse is over.
Before I came in, there was only Rosenberg was the only one.
I'm gonna glance out here and just see if I can see her.
Ms. Bonner, do you have any other, anything else you want to share about the Fairgrounds or the Speedway discussions?
Well, we don't have an update yet, so I know that we had talked about having a joint meeting once we get some details, and I know that the city's working very diligently on the financing. It's it's a complex proposal, so we're just waiting until we get all of the details that we need on the financing to finish up, the other discussions related to operations and logistics.
I didn't find Porterfield, but I found Syracuse.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that we are having our first indoor events this weekend, which is great. We haven't obviously been open to the public since March of 2020, so it's a big weekend for us. We've got a home show. We're hosting Porter Flea, which is a very popular event, and we have a drum show, which is a first for us. We're excited about having them. And we have a race on Saturday, and we're featuring sprint cars, so we're excited about that. We're obviously competing with the Grand Prix, but...
I was going to say Saturday's going to be a noisy night.
All right, thank you, and maybe I might come back to you, but since we've got Councilman Syracuse here, I want to move and discuss his bill. This is BL 2021-829, which establishes tree protection and replacement procedures for trees on the properties of certain Metro departments.
So moved.
All right, Councilmember Syracuse.
Thank you, Chair. All right, as some may recall, I was Chair of Parks, Library, and Arts during the visit by the NFL Draft, and so the subsequent cherry tree incident, and at the subsequent meeting of Parks, Library, and Arts, it had to be moved to the council chambers because it was so large. At that meeting, I pledged to strengthen tree policies wherever I could. And going back a little further, if you recall, after the incident at Fort Negley, then Mayor Barry put an executive order in place that established some tree policies, consistent policies. Well, so what this ultimately does is codify those policies, that executive order, into an actual ordinance. So we have urban foresters across multiple departments. That's why this is in codes. That's why I'm running over there to Public Works, to Parks, and we have planning and general services. And so what this does is codify that we have a consistent policy for tree management on all public property. There's a once a month group of a tree advisory panel that meets to discuss any of the projects that meet the threshold that need to go to this to this panel. Ensures transparency, ensures that there is proper community engagement, and ultimately ensures that we have a data-driven process here that we can show the good work that our metro departments are doing, as well as have the community engaged in it, ensuring that we're growing our tree canopy and not destroying it. So, thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
I'd just like to say, Councilman Syracuse, thank you for sticking by your pledge, and I'm trying to avoid another cherry gate. I signed on as a co-sponsor. I really appreciate you bringing this to the floor.
Thank you so much.
All right. The way that the analysis is written is a little bit confusing to me, so I wanted to be sure that I'm understanding it correctly. So this does not apply if it is located in a metro right-of-way,
Right.
unless it is in a planting strip of greater than 4 feet. But it does apply if it is for a sidewalk project.
It does. It still has to go to the panel.
Yeah.
It cannot stop a sidewalk project from moving forward.
Yeah.
What it does, it just provides transparency to be able to show that, okay, if we have to knock down these 4 big trees in order to put this sidewalk to meet ADA requirements, we at least have that data that goes in the system and says, well, somewhere we've got to be able to replace that canopy.
And that was what I was gonna ask, is
Yes.
like, what did you then, like, cause the homeowner may or may not want the tree in their yard.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
So yes, it doesn't have any authority to stop a project like that. It just
Okay,
provides the
so
transparency.
That's helpful, cause I do have constituents that try to
Right.
stop
Oh, sure.
sidewalk projects all the time with
Yes.
trees. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I'm like, sometimes we have to choose between this specific tree and this specific sidewalk.
For sure.
So for the park side, this does not apply if it is in a parks property that is a greenway or trail,
Right.
a grassland, a mixed meadow, a naturally protected area.
Yes.
What is left that it does include?
Well, everything else. So our meadows and grasslands have a master policy already.
Yeah.
All right, and then our greenways have a whole total policy and process into themselves. So we're already gonna have the transparency of knowing what trees are coming down to create some sort of greenway.
And that's through the separate section.
That's through a greenway process,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's why those are exempt, because they have their own processes there.
So, let's say Shelby Park. So it would apply only to Shelby Park proper and not to the greenway?
Not to any existing, to existing greenway, that doesn't matter, right? But any new greenway, there would be, how long does it take to do a greenway, and how much transparency of public process there is for a greenway in of itself. So we already know, like, for example, when that bridge had to be moved back there, right, 500 feet or whatever it was, and we knew a row of trees was gonna come down, that would go to the tree panel. It's not gonna stop that project from happening, but it ensures that the public is aware and that we know that data of how many trees is coming down is going into the system, so that we're ensuring that we're not going in a negative direction, just positive.
And when they do mowing and stuff like that in the grassland areas. So, okay, so that's helpful. And my final question is that, so there would be notification and public comment. What does the public comment lead to? Is it like a public hearing? Does it just go into a database? How does that work?
There has to be signs, and I've got to say that if it were not for Rebecca, this legislation just wouldn't be as successful as it was. But there has to be a notification, a sign. We're able to put a sign. Sometimes you can't put a sign on a certain part. But then the public has the opportunity to engage with the tree.
And so, like in a public hearing, or is it in written form?
It's not a formal public hearing, right? It's just.
Well, I asked because my people will participate, so I like.
Well, they're the ones who wrote it.
I want to understand.
Your people are the ones who are writing this.
Where that's going and how it's being handled.
So we're gonna set up a website that will have the ability received those emails.
Yeah.
At least 14 days in advance of any tree removal that's covered underneath this. As Councilmember Syracuse mentioned, we'll have signs posted as well. Now, the comments are just going to basically be routed to those departments so that they're aware that, we received 560 comments about the removal of a magnolia, wherever. I think a lot of times there was a disconnect between the different departments knowing that there was an issue and also making sure we got that information out to the public early enough.
Okay. But it's not like a public hearing per se, it's just, okay, just.
No, that would have triggered all sorts of fiscal notes then. About
Well, exactly.
creating a commission with staff, and that's not what we wanted to do. This starts the process by codifying that executive order. We can grow it over time if it's required or needed, but this was the logical start.
And so the thought is, and really last question, so the thought is, since you mentioned fiscal note and staffing, so this does not require adding additional FTEs to any
Exactly.
department?
That's what
I mean,
we-
not that that would be a bad thing, I just want to be
Right.
sure that we don't have
That's
to.
what we avoided.
Those are all my questions, thank you.
That's good.
So the signs, are they like the red public hearing, like codes or
Yeah.
planning?
Yes.
And who's on the panel?
So
Or just,
the,
what are the different?
right. So the tree review panel are representative of parks, so we have Randall Lance, General Services Laurel Creech, Planning is Harriet Brooks, Codes is the urban forester Stephen Kivett, and then Ben York has nicely volunteered to be the person from NDOT who's coming in. And then Jennifer Smith is now at Water with me, so we're both still kind of on that committee, but we'll probably only have one voting member. And then we will have a mayor's office representative, which will be whomever the new sustainability director is.
What a good group of tree-loving people. you
Right?
all
Yes.
Wow, that's great.
I think this is great. Anybody else have questions or comments? Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Sure.
Anyone opposed? And we've got, wait, I think we still have 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. 7 in favor, 0 against. All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, Councilmember Porterfield, we've got, let me read this and have somebody put it on our agenda. BL 2021-795 by Porterfield amends section 16.24.330 of the Metro Code pertaining to intermodal containers on residential property.
So moved.
Second.
Right, Councilmember Porterfield, you wanna share about your bill?
Yeah, thank you all so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Chair. So what we have been seeing, I was speaking with the codes department, and we were seeing some of these temporary containers that people are putting on their property, but they are using them as like long-term storage units, and they're an eyesore basically. They're only meant to be there temporarily, during maybe construction work or a possible move, but people are using them as though they are sheds, and there just happens to be 1 or 2 in my district. So they asked me if I would be willing to sponsor the legislation. And with that, I would love you all support on it.
I'm sorry, who's they?
And
The Coast Department.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, because there are many reasons why people have these things, and so I get the eyesore part of it, no question about it, but I also get, like, for example, I have a unit or a pod or whatever whatever the company is, that's way back in the back of my driveway because we were in the middle of a renovation, then the house flooded, which added complications. So it's been more than 90 days, 100%. Now, is it in my front yard where people drive by and go, oh my gosh, there's this big thing? Like, we try to, but at the same time, there's reason for why we have that there for longer than 90 days. And so I'm wondering how you legislatively handle the eyesore aspect of it, which I get, and people are using them as storage units for 6 months, a year, however long, versus people that are having major renovations. My husband's a general contractor. There's a lot of times those renovations go for 4, 6, 8, 9 months, depending on how long, the project goes and what all is involved. So how do we balance getting to where we're not having the eyesore, but also not impeding what people are trying to do when their intention is not to just have it there with what you're saying? I think that 90 days, in my case, would be would be a little much. And then so is there a way for us to look at possibly, and relying on codes, to deal with maybe placement of it, where it would be appropriate, if you know that it's gonna be longer than 90 days, or do we extend the 90 days to maybe 6 months to where it's more appropriate? And then I also wanted to ask more on the enforcement aspect of it, which obviously would be complaint based, but how does somebody prove, yeah, it's been here for longer than 90 days without like taking a picture with a newspaper, old school style? So I'm a little bit concerned about enforcement, but I commend trying to keep things like looking nice and all that, so we've got to find a balance, so I would love your thought process on that.
Yeah, and that's something that, if I may, Chair.
Yes, absolutely.
That's something I could definitely work with codes on. Again, this was, some legislation that codes wanted to look at. So I can work with them on some ways to kind of remedy those concerns. My thought would be, maybe in addition to placement, maybe considering, if someone needs an extension past the 90 days. Maybe there's a process if there's active construction going on the property and you can see that these are current renovations, give them the opportunity to extend it, because we don't want a situation where people are extending it but there's no renovation, no activity happening on the property.
Yeah, so my suggestion for that particular remedy would be if you have a building permit active, then just like anything else, there's a lot of things that are allowed when you have a building permit that aren't when you don't. So maybe that's the deciding factor of, okay, but you have a building permit, so as long as that building permit, which a building permit goes for 2 years, which hopefully doesn't last for 2 years, but maybe that's sort of, so is that written in there now? I honestly haven't read it, but is it written in there now, or could it be amended to that?
So if you all are okay with it, I would be fine with the deferral to work with codes on it to get some of those questions addressed, and then we can just bring it back and look at it again.
Perfect, I'm happy to help you and sort of go through all the motion, thought process of it.
And like when an occupancy permit is granted at the end of the process, does that then undo the building permit?
Yes,
like
it does.
So the building permit is 2 years, but would last until, like, it would be removed when the occupancy
Until
permit
occupancy is granted, correct.
So the 2 years is a max, not necessarily.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Correct, it expires after 2 years if you don't have an occupancy permit.
Councilmember Hancock?
So what about churches? I have a lot of churches on residential property where the zoning is residential, but the usage is church, and they have dumpsters. Are they not allowed to have them?
So these aren't for dumpsters, these are for those are particular storage, well, they're not storage
Like
units, but.
pods?
Basically
Yeah, that's
shipping
right.
containers.
I have
Yes, the
3
shipping
churches
containers.
that also have pods.
Yeah,
These
The
are
store stuff.
specifically for
I have
those
a
shipping
couple as
containers.
well.
Well, that might be something to raise with codes, because a lot of times churches are exempt from a lot of zoning
Exactly.
regulations, so that may be covered.
RFRA,
That may be a
would
thing
they
to
cover
confirm.
that? Would RFRA and RLUPA cover the church's use of that? I wonder in the zoning.
But that might be something to confirm.
They may already be exempt.
I bet they are, but
But we should look at
it'd
it.
be good to know, yeah.
Yeah, let's just talk.
So I'm not my religious.
So I
I
remember
think
we
we've
defer
provided
for
a
2
solution.
weeks.
I think it's
One
just a
meeting or
matter-
2? 2 meetings?
I think 1 meeting, yeah.
One meeting is, I think one
that's
meeting is
fine.
fine. It's good. I think it's easy, it's just a matter of thinking through all the different possibilities of situations why you would need a
Just call Bill, he'll tell you exactly what to do.
Before we do that, I wanna make sure that everybody's had a chance to, since we're thinking about working on an amendment, I think, then I wanna make sure everybody has a chance to chime in before we.
One thing as well is, otherwise, if someone has the pod in the property for longer than a certain period of time, they would have to be cited by codes. And then codes would actually give an abate notice, which would give them an additional 30 days. Is that the thought? And then they could still appeal to the Property Standards Board if they needed to. I mean, is that kind of the thought process for how it
Yeah,
would be
for the 90
enforced?
days, yeah.
I'll make the motion for a 2 meeting, or 1 meeting deferral. 2 meeting
Seconded.
deferral.
All right, anybody, are we ready to vote on that?
friendly.
All right,
Cool.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 7-0.
Thank you for working
One
on that.
meeting
Thank
deferral.
you. Thank you all so much, and if you don't mind, those great suggestions, I didn't bring pen and paper to take them down.
I'll
If
call you.
Or
Or I will
email
I
Hannah.
will email Hannah.
If you could email Hannah,
Please
and
tell
then,
everybody you
if you all don't mind emailing Hannah, and I'll get with Hannah, to work on those amendments.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
thank you all so
Great,
much.
thanks.
Thanks.
All right, and I cut you off because we had Syracuse here. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, thank you, Chair. I was just encouraging everyone to come to the Fairgrounds this weekend. Through the Grand Prix to the sprint race.
As a stop off on the ground.
Around downtown.
Well, I can promise you ticketing to the fairgrounds is a whole lot easier than the
Yes,
Grand
it
Prix.
is, yes, it is.
All right, sounds good. Anybody else? All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
We're done.